Hi, and welcome to A Sense of Wellness podcast, inspiring and empowering a healthier you. I'm your host, Susan Greeley, and I'll be diving deeper into the 4 pillars of wellness: sleep, exercise, nutrition, and stress management. Today's conversation is focused around something we all experience as humans and all too often succumb to its negative powers. I'm talking about stress. Emotional, physical, mental, psychological. Stress is needed, but unfortunately, all too often, it gets out of balance and has a profound effect on the human mind and body. And with stress management being one of the wellness pillars that I focus on, I'm very happy to be joined by Bill Cortright today to talk not about stress management, but stress mastery. Bill has helped thousands of people learn how to master stress so it doesn't consume you and you can live a fuller, more vital life as a result. So a little bit about Bill, or a lot about Bill. Bill is an international keynote speaker, a life performance coach, and a conflict resolution professional. He has been in the wellness and personal development field for 35 years and is a best-selling author who teaches stress mastery. Bill's first book, The Stress Response Diet and Lifestyle Program, sold more than 160,000 copies worldwide, and his most recent best-selling title, Truth, the 10-Minute Life Plan, was Amazon's #1 bestseller in several categories. Currently, Bill is working on his latest book, The Process, Transforming Body, Mind, and Life Experience, which will be released this year in 2023. This book brings together 3 or more decades of Bill's research, and he bridges the gap of science and spirituality. I'm very excited for the release of this book. And Bill has also created and teaches the 7 Steps to Stress Mastery program to help people reprogram their thoughts and behaviors. And it is a program of transforming the body, mind, and life experience. Finally, I also have to say that Bill is the host of the very successful Stress Mastery podcast, which is currently being downloaded in more than 100 countries around the world. Bill, it's an absolute pleasure and honor to have you with me here today.
Thank you so much, Susan, for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
I am too, because we're all stressed out and we need to master stress. So I really love that you say that every person is programmed for survival. I know that that's in reading on your website. We are programmed for survival. We're programmed to thrive. And I really want you to help share with listeners how we can get there. So let's start with, I know a little bit about your background and you've had quite an impressive journey along the way. I really would love for you to talk about it and share that with listeners. So please tell us more about your personal story and how you came to focus on helping people master stress.
So, first of all, I was born and raised in a very violent environment. So I did suffer what's called toxic stress syndrome, which is coming from an abusive situation. So I was very lucky, though, because my grandparents pulled me out of that situation when they were very loving and wonderful family. And so I was 7 years old when I got pulled out. But once you understand that I was already programmed that drama was part of my comfort zone. So I couldn't relax, even though the environment outside was wonderful, I was still in chaos within. And it doesn't make a lot of rational sense, but what it led to me becoming an addictive eater, and I would balloon up to 278 pounds. I became a diabetic and a lot of challenges with addiction in my early parts of my life. Then at age 20, I was diagnosed with diabetes, and my grandmother was so upset that it broke my heart because she did so much for me. So I went on and I lost 123 pounds. And then I would meet my mentor and he would take me, and I'd never met a guy like this. I'm up from Wisconsin. He was doing some studies. He was from California. He was a bodybuilder. And I had never seen a bodybuilder before. It just wasn't popular back then. So what happened was he took me and transformed me, and I went from being the fattest kid in school to winning 7 bodybuilding titles. And what this did was it shifted who I was within. And I changed identity. And this is when I would go into the military and I would start to study medicine. And I became a PA in the military and started working in family practice medicine, primary care, emergency medicine. And it allowed me to try to figure out why I had become so obese, why I had become diabetic, and more importantly, why did it shift? Because it's not as simple as saying, oh, it shifted because you changed your diet. No, that was true, but why? I started looking at blood work very differently. And I wanted to see if I took a patient and I changed their lifestyle, would it change the labs? And sure enough, it changed the labs. And so what happened was I started developing the programs around that. So when I left the military, I would go on and open these centers, and I created centers all over the world. And in Panama, I would create a medical center that was designed for wellness. And it was literally had personal trainers working in there. We did rehab, physical rehab in there. We worked with stem cells. We were the first to work with stem cells. Mm-hmm. But the big thing was the connection between the wellness and working with 30 different doctors. We were reversing disease and reversing things. And that was when I was in the country of Panama. And then I duplicated it in Peru. Then I came back to the United States, and the book took off for me. And I had 2 partners, and we started building these clinics in Miami. Now, these clinics were geared towards primary care, but also managed care. So the patients I was working with were in their 60s, 70s, 80s, and beyond. Mm-hmm. And we started creating the programs, and when we really researched it, we took 4,000 patients, all different demographics, did all these testing, put them in programs. This is before we ever marketed anything, to figure out what could we do to help these particular patients. And we did it. So we created objective. Oh, their blood work says this, their body works like this. Oh, it says this, it works like that. And then we created programs around it. So in our medical clinics, and we were not alternative, and I want to make sure it's clear, we were medical clinics, we developed the wellness component. That component was run by a registered dietitian, and then we created the coaches underneath. And what we did was we created records for managed care. And eventually Humana comes in, and that they purchased the clinics, and we moved on. The part that was missing that I'm doing now was I had the body down. But the challenge is you can give somebody the most perfect program, Susan. If they can't do it on a consistent basis, then they will fail. And it's not the program failed, because the program is set objectively. It's your body telling me, eat like, this is what you need for supplements. This is what you need for medical care, whatever it needs. It's objective. The reason they would fail is because as human beings, we are hardwired for our behavior. And the challenge that every single person has when you want to change something is you are set in a routine. And this routine is set automatically for you as a child. So our body, our mind, and everything that we do, our behavior, our brain was set over a 200,000 year period when we were hunter and gatherers. And the challenge that we have is that our body, our mind, and our brain work exactly today as it did then, yet the environment has changed. And what we'll talk about is you can't stop stress. You can't stop conflict. Right. That's why there is no stress management. It's got to be mastered. And it can be mastered once you understand the operation and function of being a human being. And you'll understand why you behave the way you behave, because that's the way you were programmed to behave. And it's nobody's fault. It's just how the human being survived on the savanna plains. Think about the human being were nomads. We survived in small tribes. We were always on the move. We had to weather the elements, the dangers, and everything else. So for us to survive, the brain developed a certain hierarchy, the way it works. The body learned to support the mind, and the mind was programmed with everything you needed to do to be part of the tribe. And that's the way we work. Every human being on the planet operates and functions the same. So.
Wow. I love it. I love it. I love your personal story. It's really quite inspiring, as you know. And I think the key, as you said, is really helping others understand. First, you have to understand we're not changing the stress. It's not going away. And we can overcome it. We can survive and thrive. And what I love is that you help people heal. And yes. Right. So you've identified that in yourself and many others, that toxic stress syndrome, which I never thought about it in those terms. How do you help people identify their own toxic stress at whatever level? And what are the most common health issues that you see people struggling with as a result? I think they don't even know.
Excellent question. So toxic stress syndrome, if you look it up, is a syndrome that's created when a child is in a stressed out environment. So the small child is developing. Everything's developing, their body, their mind, and their brain. And so the way stress in the brain works is we have different parts. We call the stress brain red zone, so I make it simple, and green zone. Well, we make our decisions, our best decisions from the green zone. This is the cortex brain, the parasympathetic nervous system. This is also when the body becomes healthy. It's when the body can repair. When we're in the red zone, our limbic brain cuts off wellness because we're in fight or flight. So a child that is raised in an environment where they can never shut this off, the brain doesn't learn how to shut off stress. So as an adult, the littlest stress will lock them in stress. When you're locked into there, this is when you start to suffer. Your body will suffer disease from heart disease, diabetes, and you will start to suffer depression. This is what causes anxiety. And so what happens is you have to develop a buffer, and the buffer is moving out of stress and developing that prefrontal cortex or that front brain. And that's the executive CEO of your brain. That when you're connected there, you control your behavior. When you're not, your programmed identity that you got controls your behavior. And this is through your programming as a child. It's called the stages of development. And these stages of development that every human being goes through begins at birth. And the first stage, you're just recording your environment. So I had talked about how I was taken out of a very toxic stress environment. But at age 7, you enter the second stage of development, my comfort zone was set. So drama became part of it. And in the moment I got stressed, I couldn't get out of stress. So here I am, 8 years old, getting shingles. What is that? Well, I shut down as a child. I can remember the moment I shut down, I was getting beaten by my stepfather, and I said I wouldn't cry. And so I wouldn't show emotion. I refused. I wouldn't do it. I just wouldn't cry. And so what happened is my grandparents took me in. I just didn't have any emotion. And so what happens is it goes inside. You implode within. So I got shingles as a small kid. I had night terrors. I wet the bed till I was like 12 and all these things. And there were no therapist or anybody then. They took you to church. And so they took me to church and the priest told me, well, it's your fault. You're not saved. So I thought, there I went. So this is my childhood, right? And you got to understand, much of our behavior is not rational sense. You all know if you want to get healthier, you need to eat better. So why don't you? Because you're hardwired for behavior and your programming is driving your behavior. Mm-hmm. Until you understand and change that, and that is set at age 16. So for me, toxic stress syndrome is very important when I'm working with clients because it doesn't always happen from abusive environments. It can happen from over competitive environments. Right. You have to get an A, you have to be the best, you have to win, you have to do this. And the parents are pushing you to be this superstar and you never can relax. So a child has to be raised who can't stop stress, but learn how to create buffers. Like it's okay, unwind. It's this. When you're in an abusive environment, that's the trauma. So post-traumatic stress syndrome isn't just for our military. And I do work with VA on that. It is for anybody who was raised in those kind of environments. And believe me, when those activate, it's going to drive your behavior and it's never conducive because it's not you controlling the behavior. So what we do is in stress mastery, we're reprogramming this. And we're creating buffers to increase the prefrontal cortex because as that gets stronger, that green zone brain, then what happens is you then can make decisions. Oh, I'm not going to eat the cookie. I'm going to put it that. I know it sounds like a silly thing, Susan, but it is that.
No, it's not.
It's always behavior. And integrity of behavior can only be dictated when you have conscious mind control. And 95% of your behavior is unconscious. It's designed, the human being's designed to operate automatically. That's how we survived in a tribe, and it hasn't changed 10,000 years later.
No, that's very true. And that hardwiring is just so difficult to undo. And you work on that. So to get us towards that green zone, how do you start to undo the damage, Bill? What are the key steps to beginning stress mastery? Obviously, it's an ongoing process.
It becomes, so the first step, and really is important because you have to understand how you operate as a human being, how the human being works, functions, and operates. It's the first thing we teach in stress mastery. We have clients, we have patients, we have this is how your body works. You have to understand those stages of development. Very important to understand how the human being gets programmed. You have to understand what's called the human construct. The human construct is what sets your state, your behavior, your energy. And you have to understand that you live your life in what is called subjective reality. This is a reality that is yours. And so no one listening has ever won an argument. It's impossible because each person has their reality. They might do what you want them to do, but they're walking away in resentment. You didn't win that argument. It will come up later in your history. It will come up in your future history, that resentment. You can't. Subjective reality is how you see the world. It's what you believe should be, how it should not be. And so when we talk about getting healthy, we've all been programmed in diet and exercise. And so if you've been programmed to lose weight, you have to eat less, then that will be your diet program. And if that's your diet program, you're going to continue to fail because it's not true. It's not what you don't eat, is what you do eat to get what the body needs to perform and be well. That's the key. And so subjective reality is what creates your programmed identity. This is the ego. And when we talk ego, it's not whether you're in pride, I have no ego. No. Every human being on a planet has an identity, or you wouldn't be able to function as a human being. The idea is to let go of that identity that was programmed for you and self-author your own script and identity. And when you do this, you change your habits, you change your programming, you change your behavior, you change your routine, and this is what changes your reality. The identity and the reality can never be separated. They're always one, and it's your reality. So how that works is when you talk about that is you have a big day planned and it's raining. Objective reality, it's raining. You see it. Subjective reality is you don't want it to rain. You're upset it's raining. You're complaining it's raining. Oh, how do I stop this rain? No, it always rains when I have this happen. And what that's doing is it's putting you in the red zone. It's stressing you out because your subjective reality is not allowing you to be an objective reality. That is when the ego takes control of what we call the conscious mind. The cage mind holds your subconscious and your conscious mind. It takes control. And when that takes control, this is when you hit overwhelm. This is when your thoughts take off. You're not stopping your thoughts. This is what people don't understand. You have to become aware. And your thought and the program held in the mind is always felt in the body. So if you're frustrated because it's raining, you're going to feel it in the body. The body goes in a red zone. What is the body's job? To support the mind. So when our ancestors had a dangerous situation and they went into red zone, the body went into fight or flight and the stress response kicked off. But the moment that situation was over, the mind changed. You didn't stay in the red zone. You started going into green zone, and then the body supports that also. So your body is always supporting your mind. Your health is tied directly to your mind. What you carry in your mind will determine what your body looks like and feels like, and disease. So I hope I explained that well for you on that aspect.
Yes, perfectly. I thought that was really beautiful and empowering. And
well, the first step is really learning. It's
Learning.
really learning about the human being. That's the first step for stress
Which is fascinating. And understanding, you said this, disease starts in the mind. And
yes,
you and
always.
And I think that others say, oh, it starts in the gut. Well, you and I were talking about this, the connection between our minds and our hearts and our gut. And I want to talk about all three right now, or have you talk about the connection and really how this understanding the connection between mind, heart, and gut.
Excellent. Okay. So we have as human beings, we have three brains.
Yeah.
You have the head brain, the heart brain, and the gut brain.
Right.
So the head brain if you are in conflict, that means very simply, your subjective reality is not coinciding with what's happening, objective reality. You don't like what's happening, right? You want something different. And what that does is when that happens, it happens in the head brain, and the head brain communicates to the heart brain. What the heart does is it changes its variance, and the variance is now communicated back to the head brain. And now you feel what is activated. You feel the anger. You feel the frustration. If you're sad because you don't like what's happening and this is happening, you feel the sadness. If you feel guilty, you feel it. And that's when the head and the heart are connected in what's called the stress loop. It's keeping you in a state of fight or flight. When this happens, the gut brain is cut off completely. The gut brain is the key for our health, our wellness, and how we age, how we feel, our moods. Well, the human being was designed for survival. And if you're in a red zone stress, it's fight or flight. Your heart don't know. You live your life through your heart. So when you're in a stress red zone, you're living in a restricted heart. This is what causes heart disease. This is what causes body aches. This is what causes you to break down. Now, when you learn, like at Stress Mastery, it's always about slow down. And that slow down process allows you to switch the nervous system over. So you're going from sympathetic red zone, parasympathetic green zone. What that does is it moves off the stress loop and connects the vagus nerve. This is your pneumogastric nerve. This is what connects the gut brain. This is the only time that the body can be healthy. So head brain connects to the heart brain. And in the mind, you're aware, you're calm, the body calms, and the gut brain connects. The gut brain is where the serotonin comes from to communicate to the head brain to feel good, to feel calm, to feel all this. The gut brain is what connects that vagus nerve when it connects all the hormone connection in the body. This is what connects the body to communicate, the hormones to communicate to the brain to burn fat, the hormones to be able to create wellness and neurotransmitters for the brain. All that's connected from the gut brain. Mm-hmm. Now, when you are stressed out, you will have stomach issues. Why? You're not connected. You will have depression. Why? You're not connected. So there's everything that happens in your body, you must understand there's an answer. There's a reason. This is the problem in medicine. So in medicine, they're going to react. Oh, you're depressed. Here, take a pill. That is not a bad thing if you're really in a bad depression, but it's not going to fix your problem. Because the problem is you're stuck in the red zone. And then those three brains can't connect. The gut brain is essential for our moods. It's essential for digestion. It's essential for fat burning. All of that comes down. And so what is health? The body's ability to repair and recuperate from each day. Every single day, you either repair or you break down. It's one or the other. So here I am. And so you've heard me become a bodybuilder. Well, I did my last bodybuilding contest when I was 30. But when I turned 60, I decided to step back on stage. Wow. And when I did that, it was just for me. For one, the pandemic was going on. Another thing is I'm the type of person that wants to keep growing. I need to be challenged. So I thought, is it possible? Because I had no idea if I could do it again. Although I never stopped training. It's who I am. It's part of my identity. But I had to change a lot of stuff. And I stepped on stage and not this last December, December before, and I won the 60-year-old division and I took 5th in the open. So what that did was just light a fire. So I said, okay, I turned 61 in August. Can I go in and win the open division? And so I did it. I went in there. I won the 60 over again. But in the open division, I'm competing against people younger than my children. And I won the middleweight open. And so here I am competing for the overall title against kids. And I took second, lost to a kid who was 33. Wow. My daughter is 35. And so, but I did that for a reason. Right. One, I have to challenge myself. Two, I wanted to show people I don't have genetics. Remember, I was obese. I was diabetic. Everybody in my family dies in their 60s. It's not about genetics. Your habits overrule your genetics. So I wanted to show people that what I can do, anybody can do. Anybody can do what I do. And that's what Stress Mastery is. Stress Mastery developed a lot through my own experiences, but a lot of understanding this is how the human being works. If medicine cannot begin to understand that, then we're always going to be in reaction. You have this, let's react to this, let's react to that. You have to understand that in our field, we want people to change. Otherwise, you wouldn't become a dietitian. I wouldn't have done this. Right. The challenge is to change. You have to change your behavior and your routines. It's not the program that fails. It's you are not able to change. And here's your challenge. You're actually designed not to change. The human being for 200,000 years, if they decided, oh, I don't want to go to work today. How do you think that worked out in a tribe while you were going through? How do you think that worked out? Oh, I don't want to do my job today. Well, how do you think that worked out for you? You were dead. So over 200,000 years, we developed that ego, which is your programmed identity, developed ways to make sure you do not change. You can want to change. You can have a desire to change. You can even have a knowing that you should change. It doesn't matter if you don't understand the process of creating that new identity.
Right. And really pinpointing those underlying causes. I love this. I love talking about this. And because weight gain, people's weight is an issue for so many. So much obesity and overweight in this country, and then the chronic diseases that result, and just that stress response, so that you touched on. My question is, because you have looked at this, how does one person know whether they are, what type of responder they are to stress? Okay. So you identify some of those, meaning you see one person who loses weight under stress, the other doesn't change anything in their diet, and they pack on the pounds. So how do you know what type of stress responder you are? What types are there? And what can an individual do to begin to change even that stress response? Is it changeable?
So look, let's talk about that's a great question. Again, the way your body functions is the way your body functions. And so the stress responders that we figured out was to see that everybody was a little bit different. We found that there were 3 responders, but there's always outliers too.
Right.
So I always say I have these, but there's always an exception. There's never one thing in medicine I've learned is I don't know anything, because the moment I think I know everything, I'm screwed, because it will definitely evidently something come up. Right.
Right.
So one of the things is we talk about how your life is kind of programmed in subjective reality, and you're just going through the program. If you think about it, think about a problem that you have today. You probably had the same problem 10 years ago. It just stays recirculating. Now, so you got to move into objective reality, and you got to find out who you are. And so one of the assessments we do in stress mastery is you have to find your purpose. And what I've done over the years of creating this process called the shift coaching and all this stuff connected is I discovered there were 10 archetypes of purpose that made the tribe function, because everything I do is to look at how the tribe worked. Do you realize that the tribe was not stressed out? And do you realize that their average age expectancy, if they got through the childhood, because that's where the disease would hit, was 70 years old? And here we are today, what is it, 78? Yeah, and with all the knowledge we have, so it's telling you something, right? And so you have to know your purpose. And so I'm a vitality purpose. So that means that when I'm connected through my heart, head, heart, and hand, when the 3 brains are connected, I'm here to bring up the energy. I'm here. That's what my job in a tribe was, to bring up the energy. When I'm disconnected, what puts me in the red zone is anytime there's stagnation. Things aren't moving the way I want them to move or as fast as I want them to move. And then what I'll do is I'll force that. Now, understanding objective results is when you find out your purpose, you're shocked, because you can see you were born with that purpose, because you can see in your life. So if you want to create the shift, there's 5 life categories you got to shift in. It's career, finance, health, relationship, and your personal and spiritual development. So for me, for decades, I had everything done except for the relationship category. And I couldn't get along with relationships. Why? My relationship program was set when I was a child.
Right.
And so I had to go through a process of releasing the abuse and the trauma. Now, when you do that, it doesn't mean it didn't happen. It doesn't mean you condone it. It means you have severed the tether from your past, and it no longer controls your present. And so when you find your purpose, it awakens the heart. Then you have to find your stress responder. So there are 3 stress responders. There's a stress belly. Now, this was the stress responder that confused me. The stress belly has liver issues. And I can go in, I don't want to get into too much detail, but they will have a liver issue. Mm-hmm. And so in the clinics, we test these 4,000 patients, and we're getting 70% positive results, and everybody's ecstatic. Nope. What's happening with those 30%? And I had to study and figure it out. And so I ran their data in the computer. I ran this, I figured this out. And I found out this was the stress belly. I didn't even have these when I was in the clinic. This is the stress belly. And there's a gene called ApoE gene. And these particular patients had an ApoE4 in their genes. And this gene affected the way they process protein, and it was always the liver. And so that was one stress responder. So their reset differently. Then there's the cage rattler. That's who I am. This is the stress responder that has issues with adrenals. Now, we see this in the military. When you have special forces and you'll push them and they'll be always stressed out. And the first thing you'll see what happened to them is their thyroid will stop functioning properly. And the reason is they're so stressed out that the body is trying to create energy and the thyroid gets screwed up. Your body's built for survival. So if you are really stressed out, the body's going to try to go back into stasis. So it tries to shut you down. So you can have a perfect functioning thyroid that isn't operating correctly because it won't convert into the active thyroid you need for energy. And so the cage rattler a lot of times has big weight gains and issues with thyroid and issues with adrenals and issues with this. And so we found that out. And then the third one is the hormone trap, which is very interesting because their whole issue is leptin is disconnected. This is a hormone that communicates from the gut brain and the fat cells to the head brain to burn fat for energy.
Right.
You as a human are built for survival. Your survival fuel is fat. The body does not want to burn fat unless all three brains are connected. It won't burn fat. And so it's interesting because their reset is completely different. Their issue usually is they don't get enough protein. And so I had a patient like that recently that we saw in our medical clinic, and she's 5'6", 130 pounds, and she eats healthy. You would say, you look at her from the outside, subjectively, and say, that's wonderful. When we tested her, she was 40% body fat.
Wow.
So she didn't get fat, but she was a skinny fat person.
It is a skinny
And
fat.
when you look at
Definition.
that, she suffered from anxiety. Why? Because she's disconnected from the gut brain, even though she's not fat. And so her issues in her blood work confirmed that because there were 3 different tests showing me that she wasn't getting enough protein. So she wasn't eating enough protein. She wasn't eating enough calories. You see, it's not always about what you don't eat. It's what you need to eat.
Right.
And she completely transformed in 30 days. It's like a new person. 30 days. It doesn't take long, but you would have never found that. So all the doctors looking at her anxiety want to put her on this medication, that medication, and she was having panic attacks. Why? Because she was disconnected. She got stuck in the red zone brain. So a conflict, she couldn't get out of it. It stayed stuck because the body wasn't able to shift off. And so we reset her, put her together. And so knowing your stress responder just kind of explains to you on a good plan, because here's the plan. The reset is not the diet. People, there is no diet that works. I'm sorry. There is none. The reset is about getting the communication, the hormone communication, and getting the 3 brains to connect. That's what it's designed to do. Then they have to transition into the lifestyle program. And the lifestyle program has to be set for their lifestyle, for their body to recuperate every single day. Your pillars for health, Susan, are perfect because this is not like Bill and Susan's plan. No, this is how the human being functions. And if you don't, I have 5 elements that they must have for optimal health. It's what I do in my 60s is not a miracle. It's execution of these elements. Number 1 is sleep. Got to sleep. If you don't sleep, I don't care if your diet and exercise is right. And I know you're big on that.
Right.
Number 2 is water.
Yep.
See, think again. We're built to survive as hunter and gatherers. You don't think the food supply was an issue when you were nomads, right? The water supply was huge. How we know we can live a while without food. You can't live without water. So if you're not fully hydrated, your brain will not switch out of the limbic brain. And this is so important to understand because we can't stop conflict. I'll talk about that in a second. You can't stop stress. You can move out of it, but you can't stop it because we're hardwired for behavior. And our brain works in a very particular hierarchy. We always go negative before we go positive. In other words, the limbic brain always turns on before the cortex brain. So you got to have water. The third element is the green zone mind. It really is. It's about changing the identity. And then the 4th is diet. Your diet has to be repurposed. Your diet's purpose is to make sure your body gets everything it needs to be able to function at the highest level that it can function every single day, and you can recuperate. That's how we age gracefully. That's how you age well. That's how you could do in your 60s what you did in your 30s. It's about a lower biological age. Diet has to support your lifestyle, your particular body, so it can repair. And it's not, again, everybody thinks a diet is, oh, don't eat this. No, it's not that. It's a lifestyle program. You can even have your cake. I promise you. In this program, you can have your cake and eat it too, but you got to eat it in a particular spot. And you got to do it at a particular time. You have your cheat day and you have that cheat meal, and everybody has it. And it's okay. It's not about living like boring. And then the fifth element is exercise. And exercise is also very confusing because people think that exercise is about killing yourself. It's quite the opposite. Exercise, and I will tell you this, I never used to make this statement, but as I get older, I'm making a statement. Weight training is the key, people. Resistance training is the key, especially for women after menopause. There is no other thing that works better. And it works. I could get and do a whole show on just that. But then your cardio has to be easy. Think about our ancestors. They had to work with their bodies to move things and stuff, but they would walk. The tribe moved that way. That's the way the body learned how to become the survival machine it is today. And those are the 5 elements that put in. So you've got to know your stress responder. And then I would say the most important objective thing you have to learn is you have to learn conflict resolution. You're not stopping conflict. So every time you have a distraction, every time somebody knocks on your door or something happens in your environment, and you think about it, today's world, it's consistent, you go into conflict. When you go into conflict, the ego is trying to take over conscious mind control. You're in the red zone. You want to impose your will on what's happening. You want to defend your mind and attack others that don't agree with you. And we all do it. We're human beings. We can't stop that. And so when that happens, you're in the red zone. How do you get out? Pause. One of the steps in stress mastery is name your ego. My ego's name is Barry. And so I can see when Barry starts to talk. If I can see Barry talking, guess who's in charge? Me. That's how I can see my thoughts. But more importantly than your thoughts is, what are you feeling? If you're feeling we call them red zone energies, that is a state of restriction based energy fear. If you're feeling that way, that's what's activated in the mind. And the techniques in stress mastery is you got to release that. If you don't release that, that's an energy. And when you release that and you move in a direction, you release the old identity and you start creating a new one. You have to have conflict resolution. If you don't have it, you're never getting out of conflict, never getting out of stress. But when you master it, you also never become stressed out. You can't have a problem unless the ego is telling you have a problem. It's just what's happening. Does that make sense, Susan?
Oh, it makes a ton of sense. And that releasing is such a key component that I'm listening and I'm loving this, Bill, so much. You actually essentially answered my next question, which is, how do you keep stress at bay on a daily basis? Because we are humans. What do you do if you catch yourself reacting, though, if Barry comes out? In that moment, what do you do to stop?
So there's a let go. It's called in stress mastery, step 4, it's a let go technique, right? So it's not about fighting it, because that's what people try to do. They try to repress it. Yeah. It's about allowing the energy to flow. It's living in your heart. So we always live through our heart. We're either living through a heart that's a warrior heart, where we want to attack and defend and fight what's happening, or in a peace heart where we're allowing what's happening. And it's a practice. And now I've got it where it happens automatically. But in the beginning, it can be laborious because you're learning it. So we have a technique called the let go technique, and it's a series of questions that you use. But there are things, other techniques we have one of the most important is the slow down technique. Basically, let's say the ego can't survive unless you're in overwhelm. So it's always going to speed everything up. So let's say you're feeling something, you just stop. Say to yourself, slow down. If you do that, you will actually feel the vagus nerve connect. You'll feel the whole body start to relax. And it's a simple thing, because what you're doing then is you're allowing the energy to pass. And of course, there's coaching. Like for me, I had to release some terrible drama, and so shift coaching is coaching, my own coaching I developed over 30 years in how do you release that? How do you go through that? But it all starts with you and awareness. It's seeing it, name the ego. It splits the I see it, learn about your body. You must work with a doctor. You're not going to get wellness with going on some type of diet that you don't know. You need to know what your blood work is saying, what's happening to you. It's about you taking charge of your life. And so it's everything from the way you set your goals. There's a way to set your goals that are identity based, and a way people set goals wrong. They set them in outcome based. And that's why a lot of my clients are very successful in certain elements, but they never feel fulfillment. Why? all 5 life categories haven't shifted. If you're not working on your health and you're just working on your career, you will be dissatisfied. If you're just working on your career, you don't work on your health, you'll be dissatisfied. If you're not working on your relationship, you'll be dissatisfied. And that's always the shift. Once you shift, by the way, it's forever. You never go back. It's like your mind's like a computer. It's like taking the virus out and putting in a new program. It never goes back. That's the great thing about it. And I've seen over this last year, the millennial generation, I have them shifting all around me. They shift fast, much faster. I'm a baby boomer. It shifts much faster. Why? They have less experience. Your programming is always set by your experiences, right? And that's what it is.
Right. Did you see my huge smile? I just love listening to this, that forever, when you said it's forever.
It is. It never goes back. And once you understand that, though, we never can survive without an identity. So in other words, you don't get rid of the ego, you master it. You set your identity. You're never going to survive without a comfort zone. So that's what I mean by I have to keep challenging myself. Because what does challenging myself do? It keeps my prefrontal cortex open. It keeps that part of the brain open so I can keep in the green zone. When we stop and we live in our comfort zone and we seek security and we're stuck there, the brain shrinks and you get stuck in the red zone. You get stuck in the red zone, you're going to get stuck in disease. The body can't heal from the red zone. It's impossible. That's why when we get older, sleep gets disrupted. Hormones are disrupted. All these things get disrupted. And part of it is because you're aging. And part of it is because the human being wasn't designed to be stressed out. So that's why we see obesity. We know that people are stuck in fear, the fear energy. Why? You just have to Google the top diseases. Diabetes is rampant, tied directly to stress response, but also anxiety and depression. Those are our top 3 diseases if you Google them. And what happens? That's what's happening. So the statistics show us kind of what's happening with humanity. And that's how I can make a lot of my programs and stuff working with people, is because I know this is happening, because you can see it. The results is those are red zone results. Obesity, and we see in kids, is because they're stuck in a red zone. And part of it is what they eat, right? Part of it is they don't move. And part of it is their minds are in growth. They're about gaming or this or that. They get stuck. And that's what happens to our children.
Wow, that's another topic we have to tackle at some point, Bill. I would
love to.
I know. You just got me thinking about so many things with that. I just want to quickly point, I'm sitting here listening, of course, and just about fear versus love. And it is, that's exactly what it comes down to.
Yes.
And it's what you focus on, and really taking people out of the fear, that red zone of fear, and into the green zone, which ironically, it's not ironic, that's your heart chakra. So I just
absolutely, there's no accidents.
There is no accident.
Yes.
Oh, this is so fantastic. I want to keep talking all day, but it's very empowering, helping people really take a step back, be more compassionate, observe what is going on with themselves. I think that's also, I just wanted to say that too, that it's really important to have that self-awareness, but you can't have that self-awareness without taking that pause, without slowing down and observing, right? And starting there. So I hope we've really triggered a lot of positive thoughts in people on how to get started with stress mastery. I'm just trying to be aware of our time today. I have at least one more question for you, Bill, and I will tell listeners that you and I need to continue.
I would love to. I'd love to do a series with you, Susan. I love the work that you're doing and what you're attempting to do. It's a big thing on your shoulders, you know, because you're attempting to change the cultural story. Part of our programming is the cultural story of what you're supposed to be and when you're supposed to do it. And how you're when you change that. And this is what a Steve Jobs did. Steve Jobs rewrote the cultural story of things. And this is what people do. And every time you do that, be ready, because you're climbing the mountain, but you're going to get shot with arrows in the back. So, you know, and nobody wants to change. It's not their fault. We're designed not to change. So everybody fights change. It's resistance. They avoid it. That's the avoidance. That is the fear program that the ego uses. And it uses 5 resistances to stop you. So you're normal. The moment you want to change, this is kicking in. That's why I know we're recording this towards the end of January. I know that people are struggling with their New Year's goals, because you're a human being.
Right. That resistance. They are. Yes. We are all humans with the same. We're all the same, ultimately.
We really are.
Yeah. So, okay, I'll call this my final question for you today is one that I do ask of all of my guests, Bill, and that is, what is one thing you're grateful for today?
So my greatest gratefulness is, so I came from a family with generations of abuse.
Okay.
And because I created my shift, I have 5 children with no abuse. They don't know what it is. So they're all successful. They're all great. Excuse me, I get emotional.
I have full body goosebumps and it brought tears to my eyes.
It's amazing to watch all of them, and they're all different and they're all amazing, and they don't have the programming. And so people always talk about, well, addiction is something genetic. Well, maybe it is, but it's more of behavior. So they never experienced that. They were taught young that they could do what they needed to do, and each one of them have done it. And to watch that, I broke the chain of abuse because their kids won't have it. That's right. Just the way the human being functions is you're always downloading to the next generation. And so if I had to be grateful and say my greatest legacy, it would be my kids.
Oh, that's so beautiful. And that is epigenetics. And that is, you have just changed the future of generations. So in a healthy, positive way. That literally gave me full body goosebumps. Thank you, Bill. Thank
you so much, Susan. Anytime you want me, I'm here. You guys can get a hold of me. If you want to listen to the podcast, it's called The Stress Mastery Podcast. It's on all your formats. We do 7 shows a week. Our website is Living Right with Bill Cortright now, but it's all changing because we're launching the new programs this year. So everything's going to start to change. And if you want to look in the community, it's the Stress Mastery Community. Just Google it and all this stuff will be there for you. Everything is, and maybe we come back when we launch the new stuff because we're launching everything this year. It's been development over 5 years, and we launch at probably mid-year, we'll launch everything.
That's what we will do, and really talk more about those steps to stress mastery. And thank you. That was my final question. Where can people
find you? Thank you very much.
That's an amazing reason to have you back. So good luck with everything, Bill. I can't thank you enough for being here. This was extraordinary. And I want to wish everybody a great day in the green zone.
Thank you very much, Susan.
Thank you, Bill. Talk to you soon. Thank you for taking the time to join me and listen to this episode. Listeners can find more information and also subscribe to the Sense of Wellness podcast at www.ccphp.net/SENS/podcast. That's www.ccphp.net/SENS/podcast. This show is brought to you by Castle Connolly Private Health Partners. We are a concierge medicine organization that partners with exceptional physicians to deliver an unrivaled healthcare experience while also empowering our members to achieve their optimal well-being. Be sure to listen in next time to the Sense of Wellness podcast, and remember, simple daily habits matter most.